Hi, everyone. Welcome, class of 2024, to the Office of Student Engagement's Virtual Student Activities Fair. While it's no longer possible for us to excitedly welcome you on White Plaza, we wanted to provide you with some essence of campus life. The Office of Student Engagement is a hub for student involvement on campus, where we support around 600 student organizations in a wide variety of categories. Today, we're focusing on athletic and recreational organizations, and you can see the other sessions at admit.stanford.edu. My name is Galvin, and I'm a peer advisor in the Office of Student Engagement. I'm also a first-year master's student in material science and engineering. I'll be hosting our session today. The format for today's session will include a panel of students who are leaders in athletic and recreational organizations, and then we'll go into breakout sessions to meet the individual orgs you're further interested in. The panel will include preset questions followed by an open Q&A, and then we'll send out a link with information for the individual organizations, including Zoom links. So with us today, we have 5 panelists. We have Vincent, who is the captain of club swimming and also on the Club Sports Executive Council. We have Clara, who is the president of Club Archery. Anna, president of Women's Club Rugby. Alyssa, president of Stanford Taekwondo, and Chris, the president of Club Squash. Thank you guys all for joining us today. So we're going to dive right into the questions. Our first question we have is, what opportunities do club sports have to compete with other campuses? Get Alyssa unmuted here.
How to unmute and mute. Okay. So yeah, I'll take a stab at this one. It kind of comes down to your level of interest. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think every club sport competes in some way. It's just finding that balance for you as the student athlete between student and athlete. So like Galvin said, I'm the president and captain of Stanford Taekwondo. And the way that our model works is we kind of spend fall preparing, training our rec team and our competition team as well. And then in winter is when we have our Pac West tournament. So you could be competing every other weekend if you want, or you could do once, or you could do not at all and just come to our rec classes. And then we also have a giant nationals tournament. I think a lot of other teams do as well. They have their kind of collegiate nationals that's middle of spring quarter. So yeah, there's kind of a lot of different opportunities. It's just whatever works for you and whatever time commitment you can make.
Awesome. All right, well, the next question, is it difficult to get into a club sport? And are there other opportunities to play those same sports? All right, let's unmute Vincent here.
All right, great. First of all, just wanted to wish you all congratulations, and definitely wish we could do it on in person. But in terms of like trying to get into the club sport that you want, we have 32, maybe 33 starting in the spring, different club sports. So there's kind of like most sports that you can want to play or that you played in high school, you can definitely continue that, or you can try something totally new. So some teams have tryouts, and some teams have kind of just like more of an open team style. And so just like basically just depending on the sport, if tryouts don't work out, there's a ton of intramural opportunities as well. I know in addition to club swimming, which there happens to not be any tryouts, I also was involved in intramurals, so I could play like volleyball or basketball, or basically like also any sport that I wanted throughout the whole year. So really anything that you want. Some sports are definitely a little bit harder to make the team if they do have tryouts, but I think that if you do want to be involved in some sort of athletic community on campus, there's more than enough clubs and intramural activities that you can join.
Very much so. And just to add on that, once again, I'm Chris. Nice to see you guys. Thank you for coming to this. I've had the perspective from 2 club sports that both have tryouts. And in both cases, they did have tryouts, but in reality, we were very, very welcoming community, trying to get anyone who was really interested in playing them. My other sport is baseball. So baseball and squash are two sports that don't really have an intramural option. They're kind of relatively difficult to play if you don't have a group of people to play with or other people who know it. And so we're very open to that. We really want to foster as much community as possible and to bring as many people who want to join us and make the commitment to the team. If you're willing to make that commitment, we're excited to have you.
Could I just add something really quickly? I think on like a related note, even if you haven't played a sport before, there are generally opportunities to learn like new sports at Stanford. So like I had never played rugby before coming to Stanford, and now it's kind of like one of the things that I do most. But I think not just true of rugby, that's also true of people I know on the equestrian team. And yeah, there are a lot of opportunities to also learn new things as well as to continue participating in the things that you have already done.
Awesome. All right. Next question. What does collaboration look like within your team and then between club sports?
Yeah, okay, so I'll answer this one as well. I think collaboration is a pretty broad word, but I think it applies on a various different levels for pretty much all club sports. For rugby in particular, the on-the-field collaboration is kind of like, it's very important to the success of the team. And so we spend a lot of time like learning new skills together on the field, and then off the field also have a lot of kind of more like bonding events, talking about things. And I think the collaboration that like comes from on field also extends off field. So a lot of my friends from club sports are people that I would then also spend time doing homework with or get help on P-sets with those people. So I think in addition to the like strictly kind of athletic sorts of collaboration that we have, there's also an opportunity to meet students from other classes that you might not normally meet friends in your classes, and also to meet people from different like grade levels. And also I think one of the things that I didn't expect joining a club sport is like being able to interact with coaches and people not strictly at Stanford, because when we like travel to compete and stuff, being part of the rugby team has allowed me at least to connect with people from other teams outside of Stanford as well.
Great. All right. How do club sports build community within their teams?
I'll start that. Just kind of a continuation of what Anna just said. A lot of the like building of a social community on a club sport happens as part of practices or tournaments, which is super cool because you're working together towards a common goal. Other things that club sports do are socials. So like study nights or cooking nights. Archery tries to host a potluck dinner once a quarter, which is super fun. You get to learn how to make a different type of food and then share it with friends. There's also lots of different ways you can engage with the community through like the Haas Center or other different ways as part of like your team's social responsibility. Also, there's different activities as part of like learning how to play your sport. Like for instance, one thing that archery does is we have what we call fletching party, which is where you come together and you learn how to create your own arrows. Which is a super useful skill in the sport, but it's also a social experience where you get to be learning something together. So club sports build communities between classes, which like Anna said is super valuable. You're learning from upperclassmen important things, not just about your sport, but about like what classes you should take or like what are the different opportunities in your major, as well as kind of like these people who are going to be your lifelong friends.
Yeah, just to add on that a little bit, I mean, these are your teammates. So they're people who you're with when you're traveling, you're with when you're practicing, and even in a time like this where we can't be physically together, trying to get Zoom workouts together, or if it's coming together on a Friday evening in order to hang out with somebody instead of those you have around you, it's definitely worth having that community around you when you can.
Great, thank you guys. And we have one final preset question before we move on to the Q&A. I was wondering if one of you could talk a little bit about what the finances are like for club sports and these organizations. Yep.
All right, great. Yeah, so for finances, this kind of differs a lot between each of the teams. So teams have budgets ranging from around $1,000 a year to well over like $25,000 a year, depending on the sport. But these funding sources come from like a variety of different sources. So one is dues. So most teams do have some type of team dues, which is like an amount that you pay either per quarter or per the year. And like, so this actually varies a lot between teams, between like $20 a team, and there's an upper limit of like substantial contribution per team member. However, there's other ways that you can kind of achieve this funding sources. So there's also funding from the associated students of Stanford University, like the student body. We get a lot of funding from them. We get a lot of funding from the Stanford Fund, which is kind of linked to like financial aid. And then there's also other opportunities like fundraising, ticket sales, things like that. So that we definitely want like to keep club sports as like the most inclusive environment that we can. Although there is some kind of financial like responsibility that you do have to put forth, we want this to be like, our goal is to have it be accessible for everyone. And there's funds all across Stanford, including like the Opportunity Fund, to make sure that no student is money a barrier to get involved in any of these sports. Similarly, in terms of intramural sports, there's a small fee per quarter per team, except most of the teams are with either your dorm or a group of friends. So a lot of the time, the money from the dorm, let's say, covers the cost of the intramural kind of fee. So yeah, so in bottom line is just, it's very accessible for most people, and then there's a lot of resources to get funding from club sports.
All right. Well, that concludes the preset questions. So we're going to move on to answer some of these Q&A questions. One that keeps popping up is if someone could explain the difference between club and intramural sports, commitment, experience level, etc.
Yeah, I can take that one. I think the main difference for us is that club is a step removed from varsity in a lot of senses. So a lot of club sports are competing against other teams around the area. For baseball, it's mostly teams in the Bay Area, extending kind of down towards Southern California. For squash, we travel to the East Coast, so we're playing teams in Boston and in New York pretty consistently through the year. Whereas most intramural sports are very much centered on campus. You're playing other people in your communities there, as opposed to communities outside, and that's probably the best way that I would encompass that. Is kind of the difference between the two. Competition level depends on the sport that you're playing. We have some communities of flag football players at Stanford who are pretty high quality flag football players, and that's a pretty high level of competition without even leaving the sphere at Stanford. So.
Great. Let's see. Another question. How big is the non-competitive and recreational sports culture on campus?
Yeah, I can take this one. So in terms of all of club sports, there's over 1,000 athletes from both undergraduate and graduate levels who participate in some type of club sports. And then beyond that, in intramural, the reach is much wider. And I'm not sure exactly in the specific number, but I would expect it to be double, if not more, than the size of people involved in club sports.
Just to add on to that really quickly, I would definitely say recreational is the norm. So if you're worried about maybe joining a club sport, but you think the commitment might be too much, or you're intimidated by anything like that, really don't be. Everyone, on this panel and all of our teammates are very accessible people. And we pretty much just want to create a community where you feel like you fit in and you get to practice and do something you enjoy. So if that means you can, at least for our rec classes, if that means you can only come to one class a week, awesome, we'll see you that day. And so it's very laid back because we want you to get as much out of it as you want, but also balance the rest of everything else that's going on in your life, which, I mean, congrats on getting into Stanford, but it's going to be a lot. So.
I just wanted to add on to what Alyssa was saying. I really like what she said about how it's kind of like it can be what you make of it and like what you want to put into it. I think the kind of flip side to that is that you can put in a lot and you can compete at a pretty high level. So like the women's rugby team, for example, competes in like the D1 bracket, and we don't have a varsity team. So it's kind of a good way to have something between like a varsity team and a more like recreational team. So I think there are a lot of different levels to engage with recreation at Stanford and to really take advantage of that and figure out what you want to get out of it.
Great. Another similar question that keeps popping up for those who aren't as familiar, what the difference is between club sports and varsity sports, if there are shared facilities or perks, etc.
I can also try to take a stab at this one. So I think this is going to be a very brief history lesson, but I think the point behind club sports when they were first kind of enacted is that you could be the best at your sport that wasn't a varsity level sport. Like that was kind of how it all started. And then they started incorporating more sports so you could still be at that high competitive level. But there are a lot of different things that go into being classified as a varsity sport. So we even have some teams where the male version is a varsity sport, but the female version is not, and vice versa. So it's a lot of the time it's going to be red tape that tells the difference, but you can still train at that highest level if you want and you put that commitment in. We do have differences in facilities and equipment and stuff like that, but that doesn't mean that, you know, being in a club sport is somehow less than being in varsity. It's just different, and it's what you put in. That's my 2 cents anyway.
Just one little piece to add to that. Most of the varsity sports at Stanford recruit, so they bring players to campus to play those sports. Whereas the club sports, we don't recruit in any capacity. So we're excited to have you guys, and we're reaching out to you because we're hoping that you guys can help bolster our teams once you get here.
Yeah, and one last thing to add is just like varsity sports can be such like a huge commitment, and the nice thing about club sports is that you don't have to like put in all your time into your varsity sport, and you can kind of take it how you want. You can put a time into it if you want. You can also relax a little bit and kind of just like maybe like enjoy your sport perhaps a little bit more. So I think like that's like a huge advantage of club sports. And I also want to talk about like we have access to trainers and athletic coverage, and then some of the facilities overlap, but while others like the varsity teams do have like priority over like club sports in terms of like practice times and things like that.
Awesome, thank you guys. Quick note to all the attendees. During this Q&A, we're going to be answering primarily the more general questions. And afterwards, when we go into breakout groups, feel free to ask specific questions about each club during those breakout rooms. There is a link in the chat right now, a bit.ly link. And if you type that out, you can start perusing all of the different club sports that are going to be at today's virtual fair. And there you'll be able to find all of the Zoom links for after this Q&A. So another question that keeps coming up is regarding time management. Club sports and athletic organizations often do take up a large amount of time. How do you find balancing that and your schoolwork and other interests you might have?
I can take this. Yeah, so one of the best parts about club sports, and it's part of what Vincent and Alyssa and Anna have said already, is that club sports is what you make of it, and it's super flexible. So if you're taking a really difficult quarter, archery in particular has a thing where we can call going inactive. So if you have a really difficult period of time and you can no longer participate in the sport because it's taking up your, like, it's blocking out your athletic time, you can be inactive for a short period of time. A lot of clubs are super flexible. We're also students and super understanding. So if you have something that's like in your athletics that you need to weigh with your like your athletic engagement, that totally makes sense, and it's something that happens really regularly.
Just to add on to that, I think having athletics to do, like especially for me in an organized team kind of environment, is one really nice way to help me balance my my academics. And so like having a structured practice schedule, we practice 3 times a week, really helps me kind of schedule my schoolwork around that, and then also helps me kind of clear my mind when I'm going to thinking about like problem sets or big tests that I have coming up. So I think having a club sports community or other recreation events is really beneficial, at least for me, in terms of balancing my life.
Yeah, and just a super quick add-on to what Clara and Anna said, a big part of a lot of our programs, right, is mental health. And so it's, at first, this might just be me, but I'm a law student, and I was trying to balance that with jumping into Taekwondo kind of head first. But I found that I was able to be more productive in that off time because of the community that I'd found in Taekwondo and how it helped my own personal mental health and my kind of gearing toward the rest of my life. So yeah, it's a good space.
Great. Question here. Are Stanford gym and field spaces open for students to use at all times? And now notwithstanding.
Right now. Yeah.
I think it depends a little bit. Like Vincent had said earlier, athletics and club sports, like varsity athletics and club sports, kind of both are sharing the same field space. So we'll often, like, you'll have a scheduled practice time, so a scheduled amount of time that your team will be allowed to use that field. But a lot of the gyms, a lot of the open spaces like volleyball courts, Wilbur Field, there's several different places on campus that are open all the time to all students, and people make good use of those.
Note, the varsity athletics groups are mostly using different gyms, so you're not going to have to contend with like the football team for rack space or anything like that. No, they're off in their own world. So all of that's totally open to the just normal student population.
Awesome. And we have one last Q&A question here. Reminder to all the attendees: if you didn't have your question answered, and if you have other ones, feel free to ask them in the breakout sessions. And if you still have questions after that, you can reach out to us, and we'll be happy to answer any questions we can. So we have a lot of different organizations on Stanford's campus, but if there's a sport that is not represented by club sports, is there a procedure for creating a new organization?
Yeah, so I can talk about this one because we're in the process of onboarding potential new club sports. In this case, it's ice skating. And so basically the requirement of becoming a club sport is that you have to have some sort of just some sort of level of competition. And then you have to be a student group. So if you have those criteria, then you can go through an application process. And we strongly encourage, if you are thinking about, making a new club sports that's not one of the 32, most likely 33 coming in the spring, then that is something that's super exciting, and you should definitely pursue that, because we want to, represent as many sports as we can. Just keep in mind, in terms of club sports, it has to have some sort of competition requirement.
Yeah, quickly taking the club sports hat off. I know someone who's on, I think they're a speed jump roping team, but they didn't have the requisite number of competitions. So I think you can also, and anyone from OSC, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can make a student to still have a space to do that. You just wouldn't technically be a club sport. So then you would have different funding issues and stuff like that, but you can still find that space.
Yeah, so competitive organizations specifically that are within club sports, they go through the more stringent club sport process. And then you're right, other recreational organizations go through the normal new org process. And that's something we're going through in our office currently, is reviewing and getting ready to approve some new organizations. So it is definitely possible, if there is something that is not represented on campus, you can you can make a group for it. All right, so I want to thank all my panelists again today for coming. You'll be able to see all of them in the breakout rooms for their respective orgs. And just a reminder that's Vincent with club swimming, Clara with club archery, Anna with women's club rugby, Alyssa with Stanford Taekwondo, and Chris with club squash. Thank you guys again for joining. If you cannot see the chat, the bit.ly is bit.ly/ATH-REC20. So bit.ly/ath-rec20. Yeah, and we hope to see you in those breakout rooms.
And if there are any questions, we can hang out here for a little bit and answer any remaining questions.
Thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, we have one question. Are we going to post the recording? And I believe we are.
Yes, that is correct. You're hearing the voice of a staff member in the Office of Student Engagement. We are going to post the recording. It's going to be on the Admit Weekend site. And we might put it on the OSE site too. So ose.stanford.edu.
Awesome. Panelists, I know you probably have a breakout room to go to. So if you need to go to one of those, feel free to log off here and go attend.
Thank you.
Thank you guys again.
Yeah, everyone, congratulations.
Let's see. I believe there is a breakout session for club swimming. Someone just asked that, but I'm double checking.
I hope so.
Is there one, Vincent, for club swimming? Do you know?
I'm just now talking with my team to verify.
I think you're fine.
Yeah, I don't think we made one
Here we
either.
go.
I think y'all can just take questions here if there's anyone interested, if you don't mind.
Someone did ask about, like, are there intramurals for men's volleyball and basketball? And yes, there definitely are. There are a lot of intramural sports on campus. Yes, and also, if I'm not mistaken, just because a group is not necessarily in this activities fair, it does not mean they don't exist. I believe there are groups that aren't at this fair that still have activities and competitions.
Is Stanford badminton just an org, club sport, or intramural? I believe it's a club sport.
I think
currently.
So. They are.
It's currently a club sport.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
How big is the judo club? Alyssa, do you know?
So yeah, it fluctuates based on the timing that they can get the mat room, but sometimes it can be up to 10, 15 people, and other times, unfortunately, it can be kind of smaller. But if anyone is interested in judo, you can get that ball rolling.
How does an org compare to a club or intramural sport? Well, so intramural sports are led by, I believe it's like the Office of Athletics. They aren't student run, whereas clubs are student run. And then sports clubs specifically are allowed to compete and have generally greater finances for competition. And then recreational orgs, while they aren't allowed to compete, they can still have access to funding and to space and equipment and whatnot. So there are a lot of different tiers, but essentially, if you want to find something, you will find it here. With over 600 student organizations, and a good number of those being athletic and competition based, you'll find it.
How about like huge skills gap experience with club sports? So can you have like beginner to advanced?
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is slightly different, the range for every club sport, but everyone has that kind of introductory level because we want people to try new things, right? It's, you know, it's college. We want you to try different sports and meet new people and find different communities. And so we have kind of our most base level of complete beginners that go an hour a week, twice a week. And then you can range all the way up to our competition advanced, kind of our elite team, and we compete internationally and we do all these different things. So it's a whole range, but our main focus is still making that a team so that you're not, you know, sequestered with the other beginners because you haven't been doing this for 10, 20 years. But yeah, there's an opening for everybody.
Vincent, what competitions does club swimming participate in?
Yeah, so I just checked, and unfortunately, we do not have a breakout room. But so swimming specifically has 3 main ones per year. So we usually travel actually once or twice in the fall. Practices are usually year round. So one or two competitions. Usually we go to Davis. We're gonna try and go to either like LA or some other like local school in the fall, and then in the winter we usually host our meet here, and we usually have like 12 or 13 teams from California, Oregon, Washington, and some teams in Utah come over. And we host that at Stanford. That's usually in February. And then our main focus throughout the whole year is our like nationals competition, which is in middle of April. And that's usually on the East Coast. So we kind of are gearing up for that throughout the whole year. But usually half our team is competitive in that regard, and then half our team is still like just as much as part of the team, just might not want to engage in those competitions. So we definitely have options for everyone, but definitely like we do encourage people to go to those meets, and we have around 3 to 4 per year.
Great. Alyssa, is there a club taekwondo breakout session?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. Sorry, I've been a little off the ball with between Zoom classes and trying to make everything digital. So, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask me now, or I can give you my email if that works better. I'm really accessible.
We do have one question here. How much of a commitment is club taekwondo, and then how do you get involved? Do you need to try out?
Okay, so again, like I mentioned earlier this isn't a podcast, in the Zoom recording, is that it's really whatever interest level that you want to put in or to get out of it. We accept any and everyone because, again, we and our coaching staff, we love taekwondo and we want to teach it to new people and we want to grow our community. And so if you just want to come to a class or 2 a week, that's totally awesome. If you want to really get into it and kind of dive in and make that kind of your community, you can come to multiple classes. We have I think we even had some people who started last year in the fall already competing in winter and coming to 3 or 4 practices a week. So it's really just how much you want to do. And then we usually do a training trip over spring break. The last 3 years we've gone to Mexico, Korea. This year was supposed to be Hawaii, but unfortunately we're all in our houses. But yeah, so it's pretty much just whatever you want to get out of it. We're right here to be that sounding board and make sure you're learning new things and being the best you can be, and we're always here to answer any questions you might have.
Great.
I hope that was good.
All right. For either of you, do you recommend a beginner joins a club sport or an intramural sport? And then what is the difference between, as a beginner, joining either a club or intramural sport?
Alyssa, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sorry, what was the okay, so I might be slightly biased here, but I do think everyone should try out a club sport even for a quarter, because I personally found my community in Stanford Taekwondo. Like those people became my people, because, you know, when you bleed, sweat, and cry with the same people, that forms pretty tight bonds. And we did different social events, and we just became really good friends. And it was good for me because I kind of was able to get out of my law school bubble, and my closest friends now are at the engineering school or they're undergrads. And I don't think I could have gotten that exposure to all the different parts of campus without doing it and without kind of just trying something new. And I wasn't one of the people that did Taekwondo growing up. I actually started in undergrad, so maybe that can be helpful here, but it was just a really cool thing getting to learn something completely new as an adult, and finding, if you're good at it, awesome. If you're not, you're having a great time and you're meeting new people. So yeah, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, so yeah, for me, like a lot of the same thoughts that Alyssa just brought up. I think like I'd want to highlight like a lot of sports that you just would not have the opportunity to try perhaps in high school. I think like hockey, ice skating, equestrian, like horse polo, like a lot of these sports I think like are like pretty inaccessible for depending on your area, if you like were able to do it or not in high school. And I think one thing that's really cool is that it does make those sports or that you like just have never been exposed to, like it makes you able to like try them out. And people, you know, like if you want to, you know, ride horses and you've never done it before, like the equestrian team is really competitive, but they also have a lot of opportunity for beginners. I think like same thing for rugby and frisbee. Some of them are beginners, some of them are pretty experienced, but they definitely welcome beginners, and then they still are able to compete at like some of the highest level in the country, even with bringing on like a solid group of beginners every single year.
I'm actually going to answer whether as a beginner it's better to join a club or intramural sport. I will say if you're trying to really learn a sport, joining a club sport's going to be the better way to go. They have more structure and coaches and a better community. Intramural sports are definitely like half a quarter to a quarter long. You come with the team. There are options to be put on a team, but it's definitely you're not going to get the same coaching and teaching as you would on a club sport. That's not to say intramural sports aren't worth doing. It's a great way to dip your toe in the water to a lot of different things. Like I myself am doing intramural volleyball right now, and you know I don't have the time to do a club sport, but doing that intramural sport is great. With time specifically, someone asks here, how many club/intramural sports do you recommend they join, and how many is too many?
This sounds like an excited prospective freshman, and I'm all here for it. Try them all. You'll realize that you'll quickly learn that you have to choose a few, but you know that doesn't mean that you can't try every single like one of them if you want to. It might be pretty like overwhelming the first couple weeks of school when you like have all these options, and you know every team's having like their tryouts, or they're having like, you know, first few practices. So you might have to narrow that down a little bit, and you might just or like learn a little bit more like through their websites, through like you can email like the people, like the presidents and like officers of the team. That's a pretty solid way of getting like a better idea. But yeah, I mean, why not try as many as you can? And if you can handle all of them, then at some point you'll have to choose.
Yeah, I mean, as an anecdote, I tried doing 2 when I first started at Stanford, and it was fun the first week, but after that, I was just too sore between Taekwondo and soccer and trying to live my life biking everywhere. So yeah, eventually you'll have to pick, but why not check it all out before you decide what you're going to commit your time to?
Vincent, what are the sort of community and social events that club swimming does?
Yeah, so I think, well, and like more generally, I think like a club sports, I think like the major advantage, I think like compared to like intramural, like the coaching, the practices, and also like the community base is a little bit stronger. And I think like most teams do a few activities in the quarter to kind of like to do like some sort of like team bonding events outside of practices. So for instance, there's like a Stanford tradition, it's like called a special dinner. Usually then we'll just have like, at least for club swimming, we'll, take out a day of practice, and then we'll like cater some nice food, and we'll all like, hang out and outside the pool. We also have like at meets, we have a lot of time to like spend with each other. And I think like just going to like events together, sporting events, anything like that, we just it just like is another community that you can always just like, text in like the group me or the Slack, be like, hey, anyone want to go to this? Anyone want to hang out? And then you'll be able to like have that community and spend time with those people. And I think like that's kind of like why I love club sports the most.
Great. Let's see. Ankita, do you have something from Christian to share?
I do have a couple updates. So just confirming, we said badminton is a club sport. Judo has 30 registered members, but a very little bit. We just want to clarify, intramural sports is run by Recreation and Wellness. It has same administration as club sports, but intramurals aren't student orgs. So that's kind of why you might be hearing a few differences. And the Office of Student Engagement doesn't have as much info as intramurals. You're really hearing direct student experience. And then the last thing that we just want to clarify, just to note that y'all probably know this, but of course, like intramural and club sports are currently and could still be impacted by COVID. So just an FYI, that will be here and everywhere. So it's not unique to Stanford, but just so that we're putting that out there.
Yeah, definitely working to make sure that every organization can still do something in some regard in these times. I'm looking forward to when everything eases up and we can get back to practicing and competing. All right, we have a few more questions. Let's see. Is there a requirement for male and female clubs / teams like there is for Title IX when it comes to Division I varsity sports?
It's an interesting question. I don't think so. I think to kind of break into that NCAA varsity bracket, there are certain rules and restrictions, and you need to have a ratio. For club sports, I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'd say like in terms of like from an exec council perspective, we like try as best we can to make like funding like pretty even across the board.
Great. Do either of you happen to know how difficult it is to join club tennis?
I don't know, but you should definitely try it out.
I think the beginner level you don't need to try out, but I think to be on their competition team, I think they separate, you have to try out. That sounds right, I think.
Great.
But good luck.
Right, you got this.
How many hours a week do your respective sports take up?
First.
Right, so it depends. Our lowest level beginners, we have a beginners class twice a week. They're both an hour, and then we have an open practice on Saturday to make sure everyone can kind of intermingle and stuff like that. I'm the captain, so I'm also on our competitive team. So the time I put in is not going to be what anyone is expected to put in. But let's say you have a background or you want to get really good, you could be spending 2 hours a day at the gym if you really wanted to. So yeah, it's kind of whatever your interest is.
Yeah, I think the range is like, I'd say like from what I can see, between 3 and 12 hours. And I think a lot of them, sometimes like for the sport, you get to choose. So for instance, swimming offers practices, they're an hour and a half, Monday through Friday. And we have people choose at least 2 times a week, but people can go all the way up to 5. So just kind of choosing how much time you want to put into that. I think a lot of people really like that flexibility. Some sports are really intense, especially in their competition year. Like I know the Frisbees can have, up to like, 10, 12 hours a week of practice, not including like travel time. So it really depends on the sport, and also depends like what you're trying to get out of it, and also how much you want to put into it.
Great. Do all club sports require tryouts? I know we briefly covered this before.
Yeah, so no, the short answer is no. Some teams do. Just if they're like very limited on the size of their teams. Some teams separate by having a competition team, which do have cuts, and a non-competition team, which usually don't have cuts. And that's usually, and then some teams just all kind of like train together, and with no cuts. But that being said, a lot of those teams are also like self-selecting. Like you'd have to, for swimming specifically, like you would have to like, know how to swim, and like otherwise practice, we won't tell you that you can't join, but we don't want you drowning, or like you'll quickly realize that maybe, it's better to take like some swim lessons before like joining club swimming, stuff like that.
Yeah, ours is pretty similar. I mean, you won't drown if you don't know how to do it, but it's a pretty fluid line between our rec team and our competition team, and it's your interest. So you pretty much let the coaching staff and the captain know that you're interested in getting to this different level, and then we kind of create a separate program for you, and then you're invited up.
Yeah, so short story, every team is different. All right, if people who are still attending this session, if you have other questions, again, feel free, put them in the Q&A. I know we've answered pretty much all of them, a large majority. Yeah, thank you two again for joining us. Do you have any other thoughts? Anything you think we might have missed?
I mean, thank you, Galvin, for doing such a great job moderating this panel. It's got to be hard going between people and then questions in the chat. So kudos to you.
Yeah, same to me. Yeah, thank you so much. It's my first panel. It was a wonderful experience. Hope it was somewhat useful. Great moderating. But yeah, definitely I just want to reiterate, like, congratulations. Like, you definitely, like, the world is your oyster. You can do so many things here, and club sports is just one small portion of that. But like for me, it's been like one of the best experiences of my time at Stanford. So I would definitely say try it. But also, like, if it's not your thing, it's not your thing. And that's like totally okay too. There are like hundreds and hundreds of other clubs that you can join as well. So yeah, just find whatever you like and kind of stick with it.
All right. Well, yeah, there's one question. Is there a website with all of this info consolidated? Yeah, well, you can find the recording of this panel, this Q&A on the student engagement website. And if you have any questions that haven't been answered, feel free to email them to studentengagement@stanford.edu. That's studentengagement@stanford.edu. With any other questions, we'll either answer ourselves or we'll forward you on to the right people. That's it. That's the email in the chat right there. So thank you again to our panelists, those who left us and those who are still here. And thank you guys for attending as well. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.